The alien queen chose me as her mate, but her enemies want me dead. What if you woke up on an alien planet, chosen as the mate of a powerful queen, only to discover her enemies want you dead? Meet Jake, a pizza delivery guy turned intergalactic pawn, who crash-landed into a world of glowing jungles, ancient prophecies, and deadly political intrigue. But when the Corvin, a ruthless faction, launch a brutal attack, Jake uncovers a shocking truth about his past that changes everything. This is the story of how one ordinary human became the key to an alien empire's survival, and why the stars will never be the same again. Story begins as the escape pod rattled violently, its metal frame groaning under the strain. Jake wryly clenched his teeth, his fingers digging into the armrests as if they could somehow anchor him to safety. Outside, the Zeta Reticuli system was a swirling kaleidoscope of colors, nebulae, rogue asteroids, and distant stars blurring into a dizzying spectacle. His stomach churned, a volatile mix of fear and the questionable space burrito he'd eaten hours ago from a vending machine on the ship. The pod, aptly named the Rusty Comet, was a relic of questionable engineering, and its engines were sputtering like a dying firework. Jake had no control over where he was going. He was a cosmic dart, thrown by the universe's drunken hand. "Come on, baby, just a little longer," Jake muttered, patting the console as if it were a spooked horse. The pod shuddered again, and a warning light blinked furiously on the dashboard. Not now. Not like this. The descent was a blur of fiery streaks and bone-jarring turbulence. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the pod tore through the planet's atmosphere. The heat shield glowed red-hot, and the interior filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. He braced himself, his grip tightening until his knuckles turned white. Then, the inevitable impact. The pod slammed into the ground with a sickening crunch, sending a shockwave through Jake's body that rattled his teeth and blurred his vision. For a moment, everything was a chaotic mess of flashing lights and ringing ears. Stumbling out of the wreckage, Jake coughed and sputtered, his eyes stinging from the smoke. The air was thick and humid, carrying a strange mix of floral scents and a metallic tang. The jungle surrounding him was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Giant, pulsating plants emitted a soft, ethereal glow, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and shift. The air buzzed with the chirping of unseen insects, a symphony of alien sounds that sent a shiver down his spine. Jake took a shaky step forward, his boots sinking into the soft, mossy ground. He felt like he'd stepped into a fever dream. And then, she appeared, emerging from the shadows like a phantom. She was a vision of otherworldly beauty and power. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen, catching the light like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed with an inner light, twin moons in a twilight sky. She stood tall and regal, her posture radiating an aura of authority that made Jake feel like an insignificant speck of dust. "Greetings, human," she said, her voice a melodic chime that resonated deep within his chest. It was a voice that commanded attention, a voice that spoke of ancient wisdom and untold power. "I am Queen Lyra of the Xyler." Jake blinked, his mind struggling to process the surreal scene before him. "Queen? Of what?" He managed to stammer, his voice hoarse. A faint smile played on her lips, a gesture that was both alluring and intimidating. "Of this world, and soon of you." Jake's eyebrows shot up, his brain short-circuiting. "Of me? What do you mean?" "You have been chosen," she said, her gaze unwavering. "Chosen as my mate." Jake's jaw dropped, his tongue suddenly feeling like a lead weight. "Mate? Like marriage?" She nodded, her eyes never leaving his, her expression intense. "The prophecy foretold your arrival. You were the one." Jake wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some elaborate hallucination brought on by the crash. But the look in her eyes, a deep, ancient longing that seemed to pierce through his soul, told him she was dead serious. This was insane, utterly and completely insane. Yet, something in her gaze, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the regal facade, made him hesitate. And in that hesitation, Jake knew his life had just taken a detour into the Twilight Zone, with no return ticket. The jungle seemed to close in around him, the glowing plants and alien sounds amplifying the surrealness of the moment. Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He had no idea what he was getting into, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same again. The palace of Queen Lyra was a sight that made Jake's jaw drop. Crystalline spires reached toward the alien sky, their surfaces reflecting the vibrant hues of the twin suns in a dazzling display. The structure seemed to hum with a subtle energy, as if the very walls were alive. Jake felt like he'd stepped into a sci-fi movie, except this was real, terrifyingly real. Lyra led him through the grand entrance, her movements graceful and deliberate. The interior was a labyrinth of shimmering corridors and vast chambers, filled with Xylar nobles who turned to stare as they passed. Their eyes were curious, some even hostile, and Jake felt like a bug under a microscope. "Welcome to my home," Lyra said, her voice carrying a regal tone that echoed through the hall. "This is where you will learn about our world, our people, and your role in the prophecy." Jake swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Prophecy? You keep mentioning that. What exactly does it say?" Lyra paused, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "It speaks of a human who will come from the stars, a being destined to unite our people and bring balance to our world. That human is you, Jake Riley." Jake blinked, his mind racing. "But why me? I'm just a guy. A pizza delivery guy, for crying out loud. I'm not some chosen one." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "The universe works in mysterious ways. You may not see it yet, but you are more than you think." Before Jake could respond, a tall, slender Xylar stepped forward. His skin had a bluish tint, and his voice was as smooth as polished obsidian. "My queen," he said, bowing slightly, though his tone carried a hint of disdain. "Is this the human foretold by the prophecy? He seems unremarkable." Lyra's gaze hardened, and her voice sharpened like a blade. "Zorgan, mind your tongue. Jake is our guest, and he is to be treated with respect." Zorgan's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. Jake, however, couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The Xylar nobles whispered among themselves, their glances sharp and calculating. He was a novelty, a curiosity, and perhaps even a threat. As the days passed, Jake tried to adapt to his new surroundings. The palace was a marvel of technology and beauty, but it was also a place of intrigue. He spent hours learning about Xylar customs, their history, and their complex political system. The Xylar were an advanced race, their cities gleaming with efficiency, their knowledge vast and ancient. But beneath the surface, Jake sensed a simmering tension. The prophecy wasn't universally accepted. Some, like Zorgan, saw it as a fabrication, a tool used by Lyra to consolidate her power. Others simply couldn't stomach the idea of a human sitting on the Xylar throne. One evening, as Jake wandered through the palace gardens, a young Xylar named Alara approached him. Her eyes darted nervously, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "Jake," she said, glancing over her shoulder, "be careful. There are those who do not want you here." Jake's heart skipped a beat. Who want me gone?" "The Corvin," Alara replied, her voice trembling. "They are Lyra's enemies. They see you as a threat." "But why? What do they want?" Jake asked, his voice rising slightly. Alara's eyes darted around, as if afraid of being overheard. "They want power," she said. "They want to control the Xylar, and they believe you are the key to Lyra's strength. They will stop at nothing to eliminate you." Jake felt a cold dread creep over him. This wasn't just about a royal marriage or a prophecy. It was a deadly game of political intrigue, and he was the pawn they were all fighting over. He looked at Alara, her face pale but resolute, and nodded. "Thanks for the warning. I'll be careful." As Alara slipped away into the shadows, Jake stared at the glowing plants around him, their light now feeling more ominous than beautiful. He knew then, with a chilling certainty, that his life on this alien world was far from safe. The palace, with all its splendor, was also a gilded cage, and the dangers lurking within its walls were just as real as those outside. Jake clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had to find a way to survive, not just for himself, but for whatever role he was meant to play in this strange, alien world. The night of the Corvin attack began with a low, ominous hum that reverberated through the crystalline walls of the palace. Jake was in his quarters, trying to make sense of the ancient Xyler text Lyra had given him, when the first explosion rocked the building. The ground beneath him trembled, and the air filled with the sharp, acrid smell of burning metal. Alarms blared, their shrill tones cutting through the chaos. Jake's heart raced as he stumbled to his feet, his mind scrambling to process what was happening. "Jake!" Lyra's voice rang out as she burst into the room, her luminous eyes wide with urgency. "We're under attack. The Corvin have breached the palace defenses." Jake's stomach dropped. "What? How?" "There's no time to explain," Lyra said, grabbing his arm. "You need to leave. Now." Jake pulled back, his voice rising. "Leave? I'm not just going to run away while you're in danger." Lyra's grip tightened, her expression fierce. "This isn't about bravery, Jake. The Corvin are here for you. If they capture you, everything we've worked for will be lost." Before Jake could argue further, another explosion shook the palace, closer this time. The sound of energy blasts and shouting echoed through the corridors. Lyra's guards rushed past, their weapons drawn, their faces grim. "Alara will take you to safety," Lyra said, her voice firm. "You must trust her." As if on cue, Alara appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. "Follow me, Jake," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I know a way out." Jake hesitated, his eyes darting between Lyra and Alara. "I can't just leave you here," he said to Lyra, his voice cracking. Lyra's expression softened, and for a moment, the regal queen was replaced by a woman filled with quiet desperation. "You must," she said. "Your survival is the only thing that matters now. Go." Alara grabbed Jake's hand and pulled him into the corridor. The palace was a war zone. Energy blasts lit up the hallways, and the air was thick with smoke. Xyler guards clashed with Corvin soldiers, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Alara moved quickly, leading Jake through a maze of hidden passages and secret doors. The sounds of battle grew fainter as they descended deeper into the palace's underbelly. "Where are we going?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To the hangar," Alara replied, her eyes darting nervously. "There's a ship there. It's your only chance." They reached a hidden door that slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a small hangar, its walls lined with sleek spacecraft. Alara led Jake to one of the ships, its engines already humming softly. "Take this," she said, handing him a small device. "It's a navigation beacon. It will guide you to the outer colonies. They'll help you there." Jake stared at the device, his mind racing. "What about you? What about Lyra?" Alara's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "We'll hold them off as long as we can. But you're the key, Jake. You have to survive." Jake climbed into the cockpit, his hands trembling as he activated the controls. The ship's systems came to life, and the hangar doors began to open. He looked back at Alara, her figure silhouetted against the glowing walls. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Alara nodded. "Remember, Jake, trust no one completely, not even those who seem like allies." The ship lifted off, and Jake's stomach lurched as it shot out of the hangar and into the night sky. Below him, the palace was engulfed in flames, its crystalline spires glowing like torches. Corvin warships filled the air, their weapons firing relentlessly. Jake's heart ached as he thought of Lyra, still inside the palace, fighting for her people and for him. The journey to the outer colonies was a tense blur. Jake kept the ship low, skimming the planet's surface to avoid detection. The landscape below was a patchwork of rugged terrain, vast deserts, and dense forests. He felt a profound sense of isolation, a lone human adrift in an alien world, hunted by unseen enemies. Every flicker of the ship's sensors, every distant sound, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He knew the Corvin wouldn't give up easily. They wanted him, and they would stop at nothing to get him. As the ship soared through the night, Jake clenched the navigation beacon in his hand. He didn't know what awaited him in the outer colonies, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The Corvin had struck the first blow, but Jake was determined to strike back. Whatever role he was meant to play in this alien world, he would see it through, no matter the cost. The outer colonies were a stark contrast to the opulence of Lyra's palace. Viridia, the settlement where Jake landed, was a rough-and-tumble frontier town. The streets were lined with ramshackle buildings, their walls patched together with scrap metal and weathered wood. The air was thick with the smell of exotic spices and the clang of metal from nearby mines. People bustled about, their faces weathered and their eyes sharp. Jake felt out of place, his clean clothes and nervous demeanor marking him as an outsider. He found a dimly lit tavern tucked into a corner of the settlement. The interior was filled with the chatter of miners and traders, their voices blending with the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter. Jake slid into a seat at the bar, his eyes scanning the room. He needed information, and fast. The bartender, a burly Xyler with scars running down his arms, approached him. "What'll it be?" the bartender asked, his voice gruff. "Just water," Jake replied, his throat dry from the journey. The bartender raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, sliding a glass of water across the counter. Jake took a sip, his eyes still darting around the room. He needed to find someone who could help him, someone who knew about the Corvin and the artifact. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice from behind him. "You're the human, aren't you?" Jake turned to see an old Xyler sitting in the corner. His face was etched with wrinkles, and his eyes were sharp as flint. He gestured for Jake to join him. Jake hesitated, but then grabbed his glass and walked over. "Yeah," Jake said, sitting down. "I'm Jake Reedy." The old Xyler nodded, taking a swig from his drink. "I'm Cade. Heard about you. The Queen's mate. The prophecy." Jake frowned. "You don't sound too convinced." Cale chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "Prophecies are for fools and dreamers. But the Corvin? They're real, and they want you dead." Jake leaned forward, his voice low. "Why? What do they want?" "Power," Cale said, his eyes narrowing. "They want to control the Xyler, and they see you as a threat to their plans." "But I'm just a guy," Jake protested. "A pizza delivery guy, no less." Cale's gaze was intense. "You're more than that now. You're a symbol, a catalyst, and you have a connection to Lyra that they fear." Jake's mind raced. "What connection?" Cale leaned back, his expression unreadable. "The artifact. It's an ancient device, said to amplify the psychic abilities of the Xyler royal bloodline. The Corvin want it, and they believe you're the key to unlocking its power." Jake's heart pounded. "So, it's not just about me. It's about this artifact." Cale nodded. "It's about everything. The fate of the Xyler, perhaps even the fate of this world, rests on your shoulders." Jake felt a cold dread creep over him. "What do I do?" Cale's eyes gleamed. "You learn, you fight, and you find the artifact before they do." Over the next few days, Cale began training Jake. He taught him how to use Xyler weapons, how to fight with a ferocity Jake didn't know he possessed. The training was grueling, pushing Jake to his limits. But with each passing day, he grew stronger, more confident. "You have a natural talent," Cale admitted one evening, a rare compliment. "But talent alone won't save you. You need to understand your connection to Lyra." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Cale led him to a hidden room beneath the tavern. It was filled with old texts and maps, their surfaces covered in cryptic symbols and star charts. "These maps will show you where the artifact is," Cale explained. "But the journey won't be easy. The Corvin will be watching." Jake stared at the maps, his mind racing. "Why are you helping me?" Cale's expression softened, just for a moment. "Because I've seen what the Corvin are capable of. And if you're the one who can stop them, then I'll do whatever it takes to help you." Jake felt a surge of determination. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew he couldn't back down. The artifact was the key, and he had to find it, not just for himself, but for Lyra, for the Xyler, and for the future of this world. As he studied the maps, Jake's resolve hardened. The journey would be dangerous, but he was ready. The Corvin had struck first, but Jake was determined to strike back. Whatever it took, he would see this through. The stars awaited, and the universe had more secrets to reveal. The journey to find the artifact was anything but easy. With the ancient maps in hand, Jake and Cale set out across the planet's harsh and varied terrain. The landscape was a patchwork of extremes: scorching deserts, icy mountain ranges, and dense, bioluminescent jungles. Each step felt like a battle against the elements, but Jake pressed on, driven by a growing sense of urgency. The Corvin were out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had the artifact, or until Jake was dead. One evening, as they camped in the shadow of a jagged mountain range, Cale pointed to a cluster of symbols on the map. According to this, we're close. The artifact is hidden in a cave system deep within these mountains. But getting there won't be easy. The terrain is treacherous, and the Corvin are likely watching. Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. We'll have to be careful. If they catch us, it's over. Cale grunted in agreement. We'll need to move quickly and quietly. No mistakes. The next morning, they began their ascent. The mountain pass was narrow and steep, the air thin and cold. Jake's breath came in short, visible puffs as he climbed, his muscles burning with effort. Cale moved ahead, his movements sure and steady despite his age. As they reached a plateau, they stumbled upon a hidden rebel camp. The camp was well concealed, tucked into a natural alcove in the rock face. Xylar rebels moved about, their faces hardened by years of fighting. A tall, formidable Xylar woman approached them, her hand resting on the hilt of an energy blade. Her eyes narrowed as she studied Jake and Cale. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. "And what brings you to our camp?" Cale stepped forward, his voice steady. "We're looking for the artifact, the one the Corvin want." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "You know of it?" Jake nodded. "We believe it's the key to stopping them. But we can't do it alone." The woman hesitated, her gaze shifting between Jake and Cale. "Why should we trust you?" "Because we share a common enemy," Cale replied. "And because the prophecy speaks of a human who will unite the Xylar against the Corvin." The woman's expression softened slightly. "The prophecy," she murmured. "Many have spoken of it, but few have believed." "We believe," Jake said, his voice firm. "And we need your help." After a long, tense silence, the woman nodded. "I'm Anya, leader of this camp. We need allies. The Corvin are too strong to fight alone. We'll help you find the artifact." With Anya's rebels on their side, the group began planning a daring raid on a nearby Corvin stronghold. The stronghold was heavily fortified, its defenses a maze of energy barriers, automated turrets, and armed guards. But Anya's knowledge of the terrain and her rebels' combat skills gave them an edge. As they prepared for the raid, Jake felt a mix of fear and determination. He knew the stakes were high. If they failed, the Corvin would gain control of the artifact, and all would be lost. But if they succeeded, they might just have a chance to turn the tide. Anya approached Jake as they finalized their plans. "You're the key to this, Jake," she said, her voice low but intense. "The artifact responds to the royal bloodline. If what Cale says is true, you're the only one who can unlock its power." Jake nodded, his jaw set. "I'll do whatever it takes." Anya studied him for a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got courage, human. Let's hope it's enough." The night before the raid, Jake lay awake, staring at the stars. His mind raced with thoughts of Lyra, the artifact, and the prophecy. He didn't know what awaited him in the stronghold, but he knew one thing. This was his chance to make a difference. The Corvin had taken so much from him, from the Xylar, and from Lyra. It was time to fight back. As the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, Jake rose, his resolve hardened. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but he was ready. The artifact was within reach, and with it, the power to change everything. The stars watched silently as Jake and his allies prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. The Corvin's stronghold loomed before them, a dark, imposing structure carved into the side of a jagged mountain. Its defenses were formidable. Energy barriers crackled with electricity, automated turrets scanned the perimeter, and heavily armed guards patrolled the grounds. Jake's heart pounded as he crouched behind a rocky outcrop, his eyes scanning the fortress. The air was thick with tension, the anticipation of battle hanging heavy over the group. Anya leaned in close, her voice a low whisper. "We'll need to move quickly and quietly. One wrong step, and we're done for." Jake nodded, his grip tightening on the Xyler energy weapon Kale had given him. "What's the plan?" Anya pointed to a narrow crevice in the rock face. "There's a hidden passage there. It leads into the stronghold's lower levels. We'll use it to get inside." Kale, crouched beside them, added, "Once we're in, we'll split up. Anya and her team will create a diversion while Jake and I find the artifact." Jake swallowed hard. "And if we run into trouble?" Anya's eyes gleamed. "Then we fight. But remember, the artifact is the priority. Get it, no matter what." The group moved swiftly, their footsteps silent against the rocky ground. The hidden passage was narrow and dark, the air damp and cold. Jake's heart raced as they crept deeper into the stronghold, the sound of their breathing the only noise in the oppressive silence. The passage opened into a dimly lit corridor, its walls lined with glowing panels. Anya signaled for the group to stop, her eyes scanning the area. "This is where we part ways?" she whispered. "Good luck." Jake nodded, his throat dry. "You too." Anya and her rebels moved off, their figures blending into the shadows. Jake and Kale pressed on, their movements careful and deliberate. The stronghold was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one filled with advanced technology and Corvin soldiers. Jake's nerves were on edge, every sound making him jump. But Kale moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before, his eyes sharp and focused. They reached a heavily guarded chamber, its doors sealed with an energy barrier. Kale studied the control panel, his fingers moving quickly. "This is it," he said. "The artifact is inside." Jake's heart raced. "How do we get past the barrier?" Kale smirked. "Leave that to me." With a few quick adjustments, the barrier flickered and died. The doors slid open, revealing a large, circular chamber. In the center, resting on a pedestal, was the artifact, a crystalline sphere pulsating with an ethereal light. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he approached it, the air around it humming with energy. "There it is," Kale whispered, his voice filled with awe. "The artifact." But before they could reach it, a voice rang out, cold and menacing. "You fools!" Jake spun around to see Forlag, the Corvin general, stepping out of the shadows. His eyes burned with malice, and his voice dripped with contempt. "You cannot stop us. The artifact is ours." Anya and her rebels burst into the chamber, their weapons drawn. "Not if we have anything to say about it," Anya declared, her energy blade humming to life. A fierce battle erupted. Anya and her rebels clashed with Forlag's forces, their movements swift and deadly. Kale and Jake joined the fray, their weapons blazing. But Forlag was a formidable opponent, his strength and skill far surpassing their own. He seemed to anticipate their every move, his attacks swift and deadly. Jake fought with a desperate ferocity, but Forlag's power was overwhelming. He struck Jake with a powerful blow, sending him crashing to the ground. As Jake lay there, dazed and wounded, he saw Forlag reach for the artifact. "It's over," Forlag gloated, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Just as he touched the sphere, a surge of energy erupted from it, engulfing Jake in a blinding light. He felt a jolt of power surge through his body, a connection to Lyra, a connection to the Xyler, a connection to something ancient and powerful. Then, a flood of memories, not his own, surged into his mind. He saw Lyra as a young child, her mother, the previous queen, holding her close. Then, the scene shifted, and he saw a young human child, no more than a toddler, being held by the same queen. It was him. "Protect him," the queen said, her voice filled with urgency. "He is the key. He must be kept safe." The memories faded, leaving Jake breathless and stunned. He understood. He knew the truth. He understood his connection to Lyra, his connection to the artifact, his connection to the fate of the Xyler. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just a random human plucked from Earth. He was connected to the Xyler royal family in a way he never could have imagined. He was the son of the previous queen, Lyra's mother, sent away to Earth as a child to protect him from the Corvin. That's why the prophecy spoke of a human mate, why he was chosen, why the artifact responded to him. It wasn't just fate, it was blood. You see now, human? Forlag snarled, his voice laced with venom. You are nothing but a pawn. I know who I am, Jake said, his voice resonating with newfound certainty. And I know what I have to do. The artifact pulsed with energy, its light intensifying, and Jake felt its power flowing through him, amplifying his own abilities. He rose to his feet, his eyes glowing with the same ethereal light as the sphere. You cannot win, Forlag, Jake said, his voice echoing through the chamber. This world is not yours to conquer. Forlag lunged at him, his energy blade flashing, but Jake was ready. He deflected the attack, his movements fluid and precise, guided by the artifact's power. He countered with a surge of energy, sending Forlag crashing against the wall. The Corvin forces, seeing their leader falter, began to retreat, their morale broken. Lyra arrived with Xyler reinforcements, her face a mixture of relief and astonishment. Jake, she said, her voice trembling. What happened? I know the truth now, Jake said, turning to her. I'm your brother, Lyra. Our mother sent me away to protect me from the Corvin. Lyra's eyes widened, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Brother, she whispered. It's true, Jake said, his voice firm. And now we'll end this. With a final surge of power, Jake unleashed a wave of energy that enveloped Forlag, sending him crashing to the ground, defeated. The remaining Corvin forces fled, their stronghold now ours. The battle was over. The Corvin threat, for now, was contained. The aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. Lyra and Jake shared a moment of quiet understanding, a bond forged in blood and shared destiny. The Xyler rebels, once wary, now regarded Jake with respect, their doubts replaced with admiration. The artifact, its power now dormant, was secured, its secrets waiting to be unlocked. What now, Jake? Anya asked, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Now, Jake said, looking at Lyra, we rebuild. We unite the Xyler, and we prepare for the day the Corvin return. Because they will. But next time we'll be ready. The planet, once a battleground, began to heal. The Xyler, united under Lyra's rule and guided by the prophecy, looked to the future with hope. And Jake, the pizza delivery guy turned royal brother, knew that his journey was far from over. The stars awaited, and the universe had more secrets to reveal. The aftermath of the battle was a whirlwind of emotions and activity. The Corvin stronghold, once a symbol of their oppressive power, now lay in ruins, its dark halls illuminated by the soft glow of the artifact. Jake stood in the center of the chamber, the crystalline sphere cradled in his hands. Its light had dimmed, its power now dormant, but the connection he felt to it was stronger than ever. Lyra approached him, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of relief and astonishment. Jake, she said, her voice trembling. What happened? Jake turned to her, his own eyes glowing faintly with the artifact's residual energy. I know the truth now, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm your brother, Lyra. Our mother sent me away to protect me from the Corvin. Lyra's eyes widened, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Brother, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake nodded, his gaze unwavering. It's true. The memories came to me when I touched the artifact. I saw our mother holding me as a child. She sent me to Earth to keep me safe. Lyra's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. All this time, I thought I was alone. But you were out there, somewhere, and I never knew. Jake reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore. We're family, Lyra. And together, we'll rebuild what the Corvin tried to destroy. The Xyler rebels, who had fought bravely alongside Jake and Lyra, gathered around them. Anya stepped forward, her energy blade still humming softly in her hand. What now, Jake? she asked, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. The Corvin may be defeated for now, but they'll return. We need to be ready. Jake looked at Lyra, then at the artifact in his hands. Now we unite the Xyler. We use the artifact's power to strengthen our people and prepare for the day the Corvin come back. But this time we'll be ready. Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. We'll rebuild our cities, strengthen our defenses, and ensure that the Xyler are never again at the mercy of the Corvin. Kale, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. The artifact's power is vast, but it's also dangerous. We must use it wisely, or we risk becoming like the Corvin. Jake met Kale's gaze, his own eyes filled with determination. We'll use it to protect our people, not to dominate them. The artifact is a tool, not a weapon. As the days passed, the Xyler began the arduous task of rebuilding. The artifact, now secured in the heart of the palace, became a symbol of hope and unity. Jake and Lyra worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The Xyler people, once divided and wary, now looked to them with respect and admiration. One evening, as the twin suns set over the horizon, Jake stood on the palace balcony, looking out over the city. The once broken spires now gleamed in the fading light, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the colors of the sky. Lyra joined him, her presence a comforting warmth. "Do you think we'll ever be truly safe?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. The universe is a dangerous place, and the Corvin are just one of many threats. But as long as we stand together, we'll have a fighting chance." Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And what about you, Jake? Will you stay here with us?" Jake turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "This is my home now, Lyra. You're my family. I'm not going anywhere." Lyra's eyes softened, and she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Then we'll face whatever comes together." As the stars began to appear in night sky, Jake felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but he had found his place in the universe. The artifact's power was a reminder of the responsibility he now carried, but it was also a symbol of the hope he had brought to the Xyler. The future was uncertain, but Jake knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face it. The stars awaited, and the universe had more secrets to reveal. But for now, he was home. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.